If you were Christian, you were a second-class citizen in the Republic of Sudan. I did not come to that understanding until in 1983 when my mother had taken me to clinic. I had developed some fever and she wanted me to get some medicines so that I would not die like my younger brother. So we went to the clinic. I was given some medicines. So we came home, I took those medicines and they tested sweet. So I asked my mother, how do I get to make those medicines? And she said, you have to go to school and be a medical doctor. And I said, yes, I need to do that so that I could help a lot of children in my village. I do not want to see other children dying like my youngest brother. But she said, it's not easy in this country. If you are a Christian, your chances of going to school are very limited unless you have to convert to be a Muslim. That's the only way that you can go to school. And I could not really understand it. I could not understand it. I said, why? Why would I have to be a Muslim? I'm a Christian. And my mother said, no, in this country, if you are born into a Christian family, you are a criminal. You are a slave. You are abid. Abid in Arabic is a slave. So I was a slave born into this Christian family. And I could not really understand. I asked a lot of questions. I said, why? Why would I be a slave? I'm a free person. I'm a Christian. What is wrong with that? And she said, you will not understand it right now, but you will in future. In 1983, the civil war started for the second time. The Christian fed up with the government of Republic of Sudan, and they pick up arms to fight the government for their rights. So this did not get to my village until 1987. In 1987, I was in the wilderness with my friends, the boys from my village. We were taking care of our young animals. And then we heard some gunshots coming from our villages, and we could see smoke coming from the villages. So we came back running to see what was going on. And we were met with buildings that were burning, with dead bodies on the ground. I recognized some of the dead bodies as my grandfather and my grandmother. Both of them were killed. I did not know where about my mother, my father. Everybody had run for their lives. So we realized that there was a danger. The boys that were older than us, that were about 11 years old, assumed the responsibility and told us that there was a danger going on in the village and that we had to flee. So we fled. We ran towards east. We ran, just only running for our lives. We thought it was a good adventure. As a child that is 5 years old, being by yourself, you would think that this is a good thing. But the reality of that situation dawned on us in few days. We did not have any water, we did not have any food, and the wild animals were not friendly to us. They started attacking some of the boys. In few days, the journey that started with about 30 boys of ours from our village grew to a big number of lost boys, the group that became today as Lost Boys. So about 35,000 of us went to Ethiopia, to a refugee camp in western part of Ethiopia. We would go for several miles, but to give it a number, it could be about 8 to about 10 miles. But it would depend on what is chasing us. Like sometimes if there are a lot of wild animals that we have seen, we would be running. There were lions, there were animals like hyena. So those were the wild animals that were not friendly to us. And so when we would spot them in the forest, we would keep on going. So we could go for over 10 miles a day. But the whole journey was over 1,000 miles to arrive into this refugee camp in Ethiopia. The situation in refugee camp, to put it in perspective, some of the victims of Hurricane Katrina, they would understand how it is to be a displaced person in your own home. You would find yourself in the middle of nowhere with nothing. All your buildings are gone. All your people are gone. So you are there in the middle of wilderness with nothing. You only have people, the young kids that you had grown up with as, as your family members. So the older boys became our parents. They assumed the role of elders, they assumed the role of mothers, they assumed the role of fathers. And with their leadership, we ended up building our little structures. We were trying to create a village more like what we had in South Sudan. So we built little structures with thatch, with grass on the top and the mud around. So those were the little structures that we could protect ourselves from wild animal and rains. And then there was no much. We did not have any food. We were not discovered yet by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. So we were there by ourselves. So the trees were food that we could eat, the leaves and the roots of the trees. And some of the roots were poisonous sometimes, and they would kill. So a lot of boys died of starvation, died of poisons from the trees, died from attack of wild animals. But the sad thing that we had to do was to bury them. Our own playmates, we had to bury their graves and bury them. That was the sad thing that I had to do in the refugee camp. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees came to us towards the 1987, and they started providing us with corns from United States of America with USID. They provided corn, they provided oil, they provided sugar and salt. And then on top of that, they promised to bring us some books. So the elders that were among us opened classes under the trees with hope that in few months we will receive our books. So they gave us some head start. We would sit down on the ground and write our letters, do our homework and our classwork on the ground. So they would come around and look. If you have written well, they would say very good, and that would be the end of it. There was nothing that we could take to our little houses and study later on. But in few months, the help started coming, but it was not that great help. We received few books, and 50 of us ended up with one textbook. And there were some exercise books that were not enough. So one exercise book would be cut into 3, so that 3 boys could have one, could share it. And a pencil would be cut into 5 pieces, so that you could have a little bit of pencil that you could write with. So you would wait for your turn to get that textbook. So when you get the textbook, you would sit down and copy as much as possible from that textbook into your exercise book, so that you would have something to study with. So, but we were encouraged that out of those books, we would be great people in future. We would be doctors. We would be engineers. That's what we were told. So there was a hope that under the trees in those classes there would be something good that would come out of it. Elders in the refugee camp were some of the Sudanese men that ran with us to the east. And some of the boys that were 11 years old assumed the role of leadership. Those 11-year-olds did not know how to write, but there were some elders from our villages that had gone to school, that had changed their religion so that they could go to school. So they had gone to school because they had to change their name. Some of them were Muhammad, some of them were Hussein. So those were the ones that came and taught us in the refugee camp.